You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com. Bitcoin, Ether, Solana, Doge, and more. Cryptocurrencies and digital assets are taking the financial world by storm. This exploding market provides everything a savvy trader needs: volatility, volume, and liquidity, provided you know how to find it. That's where we come in. Welcome to the Crypto Rundown. Each week, we'll break down the latest trading activity, trends, and developments throughout the world's leading crypto derivatives markets. If it's moving the crypto markets, then you'll find it on the Crypto Rundown. The Crypto Rundown is brought to you by Amberdata. If you're entering the digital asset class, you'll need access to granular on-chain and market data from multiple venues to power research, trading, risk management, and compliance. Amberdata delivers comprehensive data and insights into blockchain networks, crypto markets, and decentralized finance, empowering financial institutions to apply traditional finance methods to digital assets. Amberdata eliminates the infrastructure setup, integration challenges, and maintenance headaches to access digital asset data, reducing cost and time to market to enter the digital asset class. Learn more and download their digital asset data guide at www.amberdata.io. Now it's time to dive into the exploding world of crypto derivatives. It's time for the Crypto Rundown.
All right, everybody. That music means we are back once again. It is Monday. Time to dive into the crazy world of crypto. Yes, it is time once again for the Crypto Rundown. My name, of course, Mark Longo from theoptionsinsider.com, as well as from the network. Did you miss us? Of course, we were off last week for the Labor Day holiday, but we're back ready and raring to go. And in case you were upset that you missed a show on Monday, we made it up for you. Added a new show to the network last week. So if you like the world of crypto, you're starting to tiptoe into the world of futures out there, which again is a growing part of the crypto space as more and more venues are adding crypto derivatives at the end of the day. I want to check out the latest addition to our network. The Futures Rundown just went live last Wednesday with the inaugural episode. Folks have been up on me and hitting me up for years now. When are you going to add a future show? When are you going to add a future show? So finally, the drumbeat grew too loud. We could not ignore it any longer. So hopefully you checked it out. If you're listening to the full network, and again, I say it all the time, you literally have more reason than ever now to be listening to the full network. So wherever you're getting this, if you're just listening to the Crypto Rundown, make sure you're getting the full network Options Insider Radio network feed. That'll get you all nearly dozen shows, including the Futures Rundown, which I think you're going to like. We did touch on some fun stuff last week, more to come this Wednesday. So 17 and a half years and not just growing, but adding new shows all the time, listeners. So fun stuff. Check it out wherever you get your favorite shows, including the Crypto Rundown. It's there waiting for you. And let's see who's waiting for us on the old guest line today. I'm pleased to welcome back our old pal, Mr. Greg Magadini, the Director of Derivatives over there at Amberdata. Mr. Greg, welcome back to the Crypto Rundown, sir. You know, listeners, we'll keep rolling with the Crypto Rundown while we try to get Greg back on here. It looks like we'll dive on into the Crypto Rundown and we'll get Greg back on in a little bit.
It's time to explore the latest trending activity, trends, and developments across the world's leading crypto market. It's time for the Bitcoin Breakdown.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Bitcoin Breakdown, the portion of the show where we do just that. We break down all the action in the world's leading digital asset. Yep, we're talking about the big dog, which is Bitcoin. Speaking of the big dog, I think we got Mr. Greg back now. Mr. Greg, can you hear me, sir?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on, Mark. Very happy.
The tech god's not smiling upon us today, sir, but you know what? We power through nonetheless. How are things in Amberdata land?
Lots of exciting stuff. Very great to check out this fall market going into the election and a nice price range on Bitcoin as of late. So just great stuff on the crypto front. And then on the Amberdata front, we got some new tools coming out. Very excited about. We got some nice calibrated surfaces that a lot of users find useful. So that's exciting stuff as well.
Yeah, you're joining us at a good time. Of course, go figure. It's almost par for the course now, Greg. Whenever there's a holiday or something else that preempts the show is invariably when the crypto market's going to melt down, vol starts popping. So we have a lot to talk about this week, listeners. 2 weeks ago now on the show, we were, of course, off for the Labor Day holiday last week. We were hanging out a little bit north of 63,629, coming in to start the show today. 56,503. Putting us down 71.26. Again, going back to that kind of old adage. Even though we are kind of clawing back up today, which again goes back to that notion that correlation does go to one when things get a little bit volatile out there. But speaking of volatility, it's been a volatile period since the last time you joined us on the program, Mr. Greg. So what's catching your eye as we saw kind of everything get into a little bit of a tailspin over the last few weeks and now kind of clawing their way back out a little bit, sir?
Yeah, it's very interesting. So we had pretty kind of gnarly sell-off in early August with kind of the vol explosion that we saw in the traditional markets, and Bitcoin came off pretty heavily from, call it 66K down to slightly below 50K. So that's a pretty big move. And then last week, again, we had sort of a nice sell-off in Bitcoin along with traditional finance. So part of me is thinking, if you have these ETF investors, is Bitcoin trading as a risk asset because you kind of have the same type of players who are buying Bitcoin who are also maybe buying the tech stocks? So that's kind of an interesting thing to think about. But if I'm looking at the vol market, there's a couple things that are very interesting. So if I look at the term structure, we have a huge forward vol kink in the election. So for example, the previous contract will expire October 25th. That's trading about 56 vol. But then the November 8th, which includes the election cycle, is trading 62 vol. So that's like a forward vol of 80. But if I isolate the forward vol down to a one-day event, that's really a 140% one-day event vol, which it means plus or minus 4K is being priced in as the standard deviation for the election day. So that's kind of a nice, interesting, potential play there. But even more interesting, and this is what's really catching my eye, is that I'm guessing that the debate tomorrow is going to have some sort of impact on the markets, and we're not seeing that being priced in nearly at all for Bitcoin. So I think there could be some interesting kind of developments that if we see some sort of debate go one way or the other, we could get a trending market all the way into the election. And now you can sort of do diagonal spreads or calendar plays, kind of leveraging that vol kink out in November. So there's something to be said with that as well.
Speaking of the election, I did see some interesting data recently that crypto-related players making their voices heard on the fundraising front these days. So if you are a crypto-friendly or at least crypto-tolerant candidate, seems like you're getting a nice influx of support from a lot of names out there. But you know what, Greg, you kind of bring up an interesting point. And this is one that you and I have discussed in the past. And it's been ever since, I would say, the futures were listed back in 2017. And that's really, for a lot of people, the watershed moment when crypto and Bitcoin in particular really started making its presence felt to the mainstream investing public. This debate has arisen of, what really is this thing at the end of the day? Initially, people sold it as this uncorrelated asset class you could put in your account and it would kind of do its own thing. Then other people said it was inversely correlated. Some people said it was digital gold. Well, lately a lot of people have come down on this. It's more of a high-tech allocation because it seems to move in lockstep with a lot of those names. When they're coming for the big Apples and Teslas and Nvidias of the world, they seem to also be coming for Bitcoin these days. So, looking back at its performance, particularly in the last, let's say, 6 months or even 3 months out there. Where do you fall now on this debate of where does Bitcoin fall in the portfolio? Is it really, at the end of the day, just a high-tech allocation, or is that just a little bit of a recency bias for people?
Yeah, I'm more in the latter camp of the recency bias. I think the kind of the tech play argument makes a lot of sense for Ethereum. It makes a lot of sense for Solana. Those are kind of tech play infrastructures, Web3 technology. I think Bitcoin, the nature of Bitcoin being quote unquote a non-correlated asset is that its correlation kind of jumps around. If we go back to 2023, it rallied with the SVB banking crisis. It rallied in response to the Ukraine and Russia war. And then in 2024, now it's looking like it's trading like a tech stock. And there is the argument that maybe the ETF investors are changing that dynamic. So that is definitely something that I'm currently pondering. But I also think, all else held constant, the nature of an uncorrelated asset is that sometimes it moves like one thing, another time it moves like another thing. And so this might just be short-lived. So I still think that base case scenario, for the exception of maybe ETF investors in the short term, long term, I still kind of just think it's an uncorrelated asset. And that's really the attractive property of Bitcoin, is being an uncorrelated asset with historically positive expected value. So that's kind of an interesting reason to own it in your portfolio.
Yeah, it has been fascinating to watch. And you're right. Certainly, if you break it down by different time frames, it becomes very much a frame of reference issue. Sometimes it does line up to the high-tech stocks, other times to other assets out there, which could put some fuel to the fire at the end of the day. If you go back through the entirety of its timeline and average it all together, it could come down maybe on the uncorrelated, even if it is leaning a little bit towards, let's say, the high-tech allocation of late. Some of that also could be the fact that some of the people who are and have been early adopters for crypto in the financial space are also heavy into tech stocks as well. So when they're having to divest of things, they have to sell across the board. So they're selling their Apples, Nvidias, and their Teslas, and also Bitcoin at the same time. So some of that is certainly coming to play as well. But it is a fascinating conversation / debate. I don't think we've seen the end of it, which again makes it fascinating. Where do you fall? Listen, it might be a good question of the week. What really is Bitcoin? We have more data under our belts than we did back in 2017 when we were first listing the futures. So where do you fall now these days? Do you think it's a digital gold? Do you think it's the uncorrelated asset? Is it just another high-tech allocation at the end of the day? Is it something else? Might be good fodder for a question of the week as we keep on rolling out to the land of the Bitcoin vol. Remember, all these analytics coming at you courtesy of Greg's own platform, Amberdata, and we literally just scratched the surface of all the stuff they have to offer there. We don't get into the shadow term structure, all the other cool stuff, because it literally would be a 5-hour show if we did that, listeners. So by all means, kick the tires and light the fires over there. Amberdata.io, the place to go to learn more. As we learn what's going on from a vol perspective right now, let's start in the weekly front, as we like to do, because those are the most responsive to the madness at the end of the day. And then we'll work our way out. And last show, 2 weeks ago now, we were hanging out a little bit north of 45, about 45 3/4. So vol was coming in. It was kind of following the same trend we were seeing in a lot of the other markets, where vol was kind of just going to a slow death out there. Then, of course, last week and tail end of last week and into now this week, we're seeing vol get a little bit frothier out there at about a 60 as we kicked off the show today. So nearly 15 points to the upside on the 7-day vol. So things getting a little bit juicier, a little bit spicier out there. If we go out to a more standardized vol metric, 30 days, that's looking higher as well, but not quite as spicy. 50, almost 50 and a half on our show last week, about 50.4. Coming in the start of the show today, 56. So up a little over 5.5 points on the last 2 weeks. So again, getting frothier out there, but not as big of a point swing as the weekly stuff, which again is what we would expect at the end of the day. And going out further still, let's go out 6 months. Let's see what the hodlers are up to, listeners. They're always going to hodl. The question is how much. And on the show 2 weeks ago, the vol was a 63.4. Coming into the start of the show today, 6-month vol, 64.5. So up a little over a point, about 1.1 points. Greg, you just talking about the term structure and how the election is impacting the vol out there. Anything else catching your eye from a Bitcoin vol perspective, sir?
Yeah, I think the other kind of obvious place to look at is the skew. So given sort of the recent sell-off, we're seeing, 7-day skew, trading pretty low, meaning the puts are bid above the calls. But this is kind of flipping once you get past 60 days. 60 days become positive to the call side again, and then 180 days becomes sort of the most positive as far as the options that we're tracking. So short term, the option market is saying short term headwinds, but still seeing more explosiveness to the upside than to the downside on a longer term basis. So I think that's something interesting. There's probably some trades to be done there, kind of taking advantage of the recent sell-off and structuring something where you're taking advantage of that skew.
Speaking of taking advantage of the skew, let's get out to the skew right now, listeners. And as we're kicking off the show out here in good old BTC, we were on the show this time 2 weeks ago. We had the 7-day skew at about a little over -1, about -1.2, coming into the start of the show today. The skew getting a little bit hairier to the downside, down about 2 points to about a -3.2. Of course, that isn't the tail for how low we got. The weekly skew actually got down. Looks like the nadir came last Friday, and it was right about a -8. And that was, again, last Friday. So things were looking a little bit more dire on the Bitcoin weekly skew front this time on Friday. Right now, still looking a little bit bearish, but not quite as aggressive as it was this time on Friday, which again is the interesting thing when you're looking at the weekly options, listeners, because that skew is going to evolve very quickly. Sometimes intraday, you could see big skew swings out there. Going out to the 30-day skew, so again, a little bit standardized skew metric out there, and not a huge evolution there, which is kind of interesting. Looks like by the way, the 30-day skew, the lowest it got was about -3.5 back on Friday. Right now, it's at about a -1, so mildly bearish. I would mostly call that flat. In fact, it was exactly flat 2 weeks ago. So a little bit of downside action since then, but again, not going to be as wild as the 7-day options, and that's what we expect out there. And then, of course, the 6-month skew, again, always, or I shouldn't say always, nothing is always at the end of the day, mostly biased to the upside. And that remains the case right now. It was a positive 2.4 on the show 2 weeks ago, coming in to start the show today at about a positive 3. Mr. Greg, you kind of just mentioned the skew. Anything out there catching your eye? And what were you thinking back on Friday last week when we were looking a little bit spicier to the downside from a skew perspective, sir?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think what can be interesting right now is that since the short-dated skew is still negative to the downside, there might be some interesting reaction time around sort of that debate and what's going on there. So, anyone who's watching the debate, there's going to be some good trading activity, I think, during the debate, and then post-debate, some good potential trends. So, you could either sell the skew or buy the skew, go long the put side or go short the put side. So I think that's kind of interesting. Last Friday, it was looking pretty dire for crypto and the general markets. I do think there's probably some headwinds still. Like even if we have a short-term relief rally in sort of this week, and then even maybe like post-election going into the end of the year, I'd be surprised that there isn't still like some craziness between now and the election. And so to me, there's probably some interesting trades to be done around that. So I think that's why the skew is still pricing in that negative. Even though we've had a nice big rally today, even the short-term skew and the medium-term skew is still kind of pricing in that negative risk. And I think that's really the market paying attention and saying, there's probably another episode of kind of craziness, maybe not as bad as August 5th, but something like that between now and the election.
Nice thing about the crypto markets, or maybe the dark side, if that person who likes a little bit of a respite, listeners, is of course they will be trading during the debate. So if you hear something you don't like, you want to crush Bitcoin or vice versa, ETH, whatever the case may be, you can do that. So a little bit more action around the debate than, of course, you can go out in some of the big, equity futures and things like that, but not a ton of liquidity for a lot of the stocks you're going to want to sling during the debate out there. So crypto, both a plus and a minus. For those of you out there who like to hear a closing bell, so they could take a break. Crypto doesn't really offer that, but it's going to offer you liquidity during the debate, which should be intriguing. Speaking of intriguing, let's get out to some of the other products you folks like to hold and sling in your portfolio, especially if you want a little bit of crypto options action. Let's get out to BITO first. That's at 17 and a quarter when we kicked off the show. Clawing its way back up a little bit today. Was at about 17 even, not that far before showtime. Still down a little over 3, about 3 and a quarter points from where it was 2 weeks ago. The ADV also coming in quite a bit over the last 2 weeks. So that sell-off not really popping volume out there. 81,000 contracts a day, still pretty active, but that's down about 22,000 from where it was this time 2 weeks ago. Today, looking at 52,000 contracts on the tape with about half an hour to go in the session. So doesn't seem like we're going to hit that today, but again, the session is not quite done yet. Anything could happen. Vol obviously looking a little bit more frothy out there. 57.5. It was at a 50 even 2 weeks ago, so up about 7.5 points out there right now. The big dog positions in BITO options still the same as they were. They pretty much have been for quite some time. 124,000 of the Jan 30s, 84,000 of the Jan 35s. If you want to do a quick top 5, number 3, 75,000 of the Jan 25s. Nearer dated, a little closer to home, number 4, 54,000 of the SEP 25s. Obviously got a little bit more time for those, but not much. Clock is ticking on those bad boys, so if past his prologue, they are probably long those. And again, 25 is a little bit in the rearview mirror right now. And then number 5 out there, 44,000 of the SEP 50s. So I think that was the other part of a vertical, in which case they're probably happy to be short those. But intriguing stuff. Mr. Greg, anything catching your eye out there in the world of BITO before we get to your favorite product, the, shall we say, frenetic BITX?
That is definitely one of my favorite products for sure. No, I think people are kind of catching on to sort of the trickiness of trading BITO. So it'll be interesting to kind of see, if BITO can still keep up some of that open interest and some of those volumes once we finally get some spot Bitcoin ETF options. But as of right now, nothing new from my usual, there's going to be a dividend being priced in here. So there's kind of those types of 1x2 out of the money calls structures that are always interesting. But otherwise, I'm just sitting and watching it.
All right, Greg, twist my arm. We'll get to your favorite, BITX, the levered Bitcoin proxy. So if you're like Greg, listeners, if BITO just doesn't do it for you, doesn't get you excited, you want a little bit more leverage, a little bit more bang for your buck, then BITX is your huckleberry. Listen, this is the 2X levered Bitcoin product out there. 2370 when we kicked off the show, down over 7, about 730 on the last couple of weeks. So again, doing its job. A little over 2X actually to the downside out there in BITX. So delivering once again. Volume-wise, kind of treading water, about 19,000 contracts a day. That's down about 1,000. Hitting about 16,000 right now, so they might threaten it, might not out there today. The vol remaining spicy out there as well at about a 118, which makes sense. It's almost exactly 2X what you're getting in BITO, so it is delivering out there. The top dog position, this has been out here for a while. Greg and I have talked about these in the past. These a very, very long-term, very meaty Jan 2026 70 puts. Yes, 7-0, listeners. You heard me correctly. That's still the big dog out there. Number 2, 4,000 of the Jan 2026 20s. So it's a lot of long-term paper out here, which is kind of fascinating for this product. So interesting stuff. But Greg, I know you're just champing at the bit to talk BITX. So have at it, sir. The floor is yours.
Yeah, definitely. So BITX is just one of those great examples of the 2X performance decay. So if I look at the chart going back to the beginning of this rally in Bitcoin, October 2023, Bitcoin broke above 30,000 and went all the way to 70K. That pretty much brought BITX from, call it $11 to $60. Makes sense, kind of have that compounding effect. But now, since we've kind of been consolidating from trying to test the all-time highs, 73K to now 56K, kind of really in that range. Well, these are the times that decay component really grinds away at the value. So since the pullback of, call it, 73 to 56 in Bitcoin, BITX has gone from 60 down to 23. So, the underlying has maybe lost, call it, 20%, and then the actual BITX has lost something like 66%. And that's really that grinding effect. So every time Bitcoin has a pullback and rallies back up, BITX is going to underperform. And so in my mind, there's probably an interesting play here. If you're kind of thinking, Bitcoin is going to be, it might test the top of the range pre-election, but it won't really break out of that. There's kind of some interesting ways to structure a trade where even like it's selling an partially in the money call spread. If there's consolidation, that can actually still underperform and fall out of that strike zone. So that's something that's interesting. And then BITX right now, obviously 2 times vol. And so when we're looking at 2 times vol, the current, excuse me, 1 second here. Got an Amber Alert in the middle of the call. So the BITX, the 2 times the Bitcoin volatility, essentially, while Bitcoin 30-day vol has recently been between 50 and 70, but as not that long ago, June of this year is between 30 and 40. So should we go back into a lower vol environment post the craziness of the election, that'll be another thing that kind of benefits sort of the vol sellers in BITX as well. So there's something to be said there with those types of structures.
All right, fascinating stuff. Listeners, have you sunk your teeth into BITX? Is a little bit too, maybe too spicy for you? Speaking of spicy, let's get out of here on Mara as well. Another name you folks like to sling a ton of options on. Even though the ADV continues to come in, it's roughly half what it was not too long ago, but still explosive. 205,000 contracts a day. That is nothing to sneeze at. A lot of names out there would kill for that volume. Mara right now, 1470, down about $4 almost exactly since our last show 2 weeks ago. So kind of hanging out now towards the lower end of its range that it seems to be bouncing around at lately, right around roughly 15 and up to about 30, obviously a little bit below that right now. But you look at this chart, it's just shot up to about, got up to 31 in December, then right back down to about 15 again in January, then right back up to 31 again in February, and back down to about 15 again in April. This time the upside was close, but no cigar, got up to about 27 in July, and now coming back down the other side. So are we poised for a bounce? Is this the time when it breaks through the bottom out there? Intriguing stuff. Looks like a decent amount of paper on the tape today, 171,000. So they are on pace to maybe hit that ADV by the end of the day. The vol also looking spicy as well, and 90 even, up 7 points from where it was this time last week. And again, as I said before, the size positions here in Mara kind of reflecting that range I was just talking about. We've seen for a while the big dog out here is 34,000 of the SEP 30, so right at the upper band of that range. That one looking kind of like a bit of a distant memory right now, but we'll keep an eye on that. Anything could happen in the next couple of weeks. Mara could get back up there, but if past its prologue right now, probably not going to hit it. Again, who knows? Maybe the debate throws a wrench into the works and it goes skyrocketing north. But right now, it seems kind of rough. Also, the 30 strike, again, that has a certain magnetism for folks out there because the number 2 size position in Mara options right now, 28,000 of the Jan 30. So maybe that same person who's maybe getting a little run over in the SEP 30s, buying himself a little bit more time going out to Jan. Either way, a lot of people noticing that 30 level and they're putting a lot of their money where their mouth is on that strike, listener. So intriguing stuff out there in Mara. But speaking of intriguing, let's get to the rest of it right now. It is time to explore the altcoin universe.
It's time to move beyond Bitcoin and find out what's moving the rest of the crypto marketplace. It's time to boldly venture into the altcoin universe.
All right, listeners, welcome to the altcoin universe. Time for one of my favorite portions of the show because I just love the slugfest that goes on here from a crypto market cap perspective, especially in the bottom half of our top 10. Just a battle royal every week to see who's going to make it into the bottom half, who's going to make it in right under the wire at number 10. And Greg, I know you're a little bit nervous right now, so allow me to put your mind at ease because your beloved Toncoin did make it. Slipping right in under the wire at number 10, sir. I know that will alleviate a lot of your concerns you have, Greg.
Yes, exactly. That's been an interesting currency and around the fundamentals of the CEO. So there's definitely been some trading opportunities there. Not something that I follow closely, Toncoin, but definitely in play, so to speak.
Don't let his politeness confuse you, listeners. Toncoin is out of the top 10. He has a hard time sleeping at night. So I'm glad to report to him that Toncoin back and holding on to its spot, Greg, in the top 10. So you should be able to sleep well tonight. Toncoin number 10, listeners, 13 billion, pretty much exactly worth the market cap. So holding in right in at number 10. Number 9, keeping it in the T names. We've got Tron coming in at number 9, 13.4 billion with the market cap. Number 8, Elon's favorite, it's Doge, 15 billion exactly. So Doge managing to cling to its number 8 spot over the last 2 weeks. No mean feat given all the action we've seen out there. Number 7, XRP. This one can't seem to get out of its own way, but it's kind of glued to the number 7 spot. 30 billion worth of market cap. Number 6, USD coin, 35 billion. Number 5, it's Solana, 62 billion. Number 4, BNB, 75, almost 75.5 billion. Number 3 is Tether, 118. Number 2, it's ETH, 280. And the big dog, 1.1 trillion worth of market cap. Yes, it is Bitcoin. Let's get out to number 2, though, in market cap. Number 1 in a lot of your hearts, it is ETH. 2,700, almost exactly when we kicked off the show 2 weeks ago, 2,705. Coming in to start the show today, 2,335, down almost 400 handles, about 370. Range-wise, we got down a little bit lower than that. And again, most of that nadir came last Friday, so no surprise that when the skew was maximizing to the downside, that's when we also hit the low in ETH and indeed Bitcoin over the last couple of weeks. 22.25 was as low as we got on Friday before things kind of settled out. And the high was pretty much on our show last week, 27.05, 2 weeks ago, I should say. So a lot to unpack. Greg, what's been catching your eye out there in your beloved ETH since our last chat, sir?
Yeah, ETH has been interesting because there's kind of two strong trends. One is the implied vol of ETH is finally at a pretty decent premium over Bitcoin. So the relative vol picture for Ethereum is something that's kind of been different since 2023, where ETH and Bitcoin were lockstep in vol. So that's kind of interesting. And then the other interesting aspect of ETH is that it is clearly just continuing to underperform Bitcoin. So if I look at the Bitcoin ETH ratio, I mean, this is just kind of a steady line, like a steady trend downwards since basically September 2022. And so in September 2022, ETH was 8% of a Bitcoin, and now it's 4% of a Bitcoin. And this trend kind of just seems unbothered, and it's going to continue. It could go as low as 2% of a Bitcoin, judging by sort of the historical chart. So I think those two trends are things to keep in mind. But what we've really found interesting is that when we had the spot Bitcoin ETF approval, we saw huge open interest in CME futures kind of related to that type of event. And then in the Ethereum spot ETF, there's been almost no sort of interest in the Ethereum futures on CME. So to me, that's kind of telling of the investor base. You know, what kind of exposure do they want, and where are they kind of playing and laying down their chips? And so ETH is kind of lackluster. And so in my mind, there's probably a decent vol fade, relative vol fade, where you can bet that a lot of the vol action probably comes back into Bitcoin should there be a good catalyst. And then at least in the medium term, I still think short term there's different reasons for ETH to have high vol, but in sort of the short term to medium term, I think that's a decent trade. And I think also if you're going to sell vol in ETH, you could basically do, you know, a type of like covered call roll or like spread. So sell a covered, not necessarily covered call, a call spread, sell a call spread in ETH and buy the call spread in Bitcoin. And so not only is that a vol bet, but it's also a bet on sort of the Bitcoin ETH ratio continuing to go downward. So those are the types of things that are really capturing my attention in ETH. Unfortunate, because I've always been such an ETH fan and maxi, and thought that, you know, ETH would become the number one market cap coin, but that hasn't materialized. And now I'm just kind of seeing a different trend here in the market. And I think that trend probably sticks around.
Let's see what's sticking around out there from a vol and indeed a skew perspective. Listeners, let's kick things off on the vol front. Spoiler alert, higher than we were 2 weeks ago. We're at about a 54.5 on the weekly vol in ETH 2 weeks ago. 70.75 right now, so getting a little bit spicier out there. 30-day vol, again, a more standardized vol metric, at about a 59 2 weeks ago, almost 68, right now 67 and about 2/3 as we were kicking off the show. And the 6-month vol, 72.25 on the show 2 weeks ago, 74.5, so ticking up about 2.25 points out there. Skew wise, same deal as Bitcoin. Obviously going to be a little bit more biased to the dark side right now, but also bouncing off the lows that we saw on Friday. Weekly skew last show 2 weeks ago, almost a -2, -1.75. So we were hanging out in slightly bearish territory even back then. Right now, looking a little bit more dark side, -4.5. So decently bearish, all things considered. Of course, again, we have rebounded off the lows, which we kissed back on Friday of almost -10, -9.6 in that weekly skew. So not surprisingly, things were looking pretty biased to the dark side. We have bounced off that, but still a decided bearish sentiment, at least in the weekly near-dated options. We go out a little bit farther. Let's go out to the monthly skew. We're at almost a -2 this time 2 weeks ago, -1.75. And we're slightly more than that now, about -2.33 points out there. So ticking up a little bit to the dark side, but not much out there. And going out all the way to the 6-month skew, we're at almost a +3 this time 2 weeks ago, 2.85 to be precise. Coming in the start of the show today, a little bit below 4, 3.9. So looking a little bit more optimistic, more effervescent for the hodlers out there. Greg, anything else catching your eye from a ETH, vol, or skew perspective, sir?
Yeah, also for ETH, like if we look at the sort of the variance risk premium in Ethereum, just looking at the differential between realized vol and implied vol, there's kind of in the 7-day variance risk premium, there's a decent sort of spread right now where at the money 7 days trading 70 vol, where realized really kind of 62. So we're kind of back into this premium for ETH sellers. And what we've seen since the Shanghai upgrade is we've seen consistent ETH covered call sellers. And so typically, that type of flow will crush that premium. And to have that premium there right now is kind of makes it an interesting time to take advantage of that. So that's something else that, we've been looking at consistently.
Speaking of things you're looking at consistently, I'll break down a little bit of the rest of the altcoin universe. And I know you always have a few interesting altcoin burning a hole in your pocket, Mr. Greg. So feel free to share them with us. Let's go out to Solana first. Obviously, they came for Solana a little bit since our last show. 158 and about a half was where we were 2 weeks ago. Coming in to start the show today, a little bit shy of 133, 132.90. Puts it down over 25, about 25.6 handles on the last couple of weeks. XRP, you know the deal. Can't get out of its own way. It was 58.5 cents 2 weeks ago, which is looking pretty frothy for XRP, actually. Back down to about 53.5 cents, so down about a little over a nickel on the last couple of weeks out there. Doge, we talked about it earlier, 10.5 cents 2 weeks ago, 10.3 cents this week. So down slightly, but still managing to cling to its number 8 spot over there on the market cap. A Litecoin, 63.75 2 weeks ago, 60.93 right now, so down about 282 over the last couple of weeks. Cardano, 37 cents 2 weeks ago, 34 cents this week, so down about 3 cents. Polkadot, 4.58 2 weeks ago, 4.29, so down 29 cents. And Greg's other favorite outside of Toncoin, of course, the mighty Shiba Inu, a million zeros, 1.448 2 weeks ago. This week is a whopping 1.357. So giving up some of the ghosts. No Shiba Lambos, unfortunately, in the offing this week. Mr. Greg, before we roll out of here, any other altcoin burning a hole in either your wallet or just your analytics screen you want to share with us?
Yeah, well, just touching on Solana real quick. There's a couple interesting trends of Solana. So if we view Solana as an Ethereum competitor, we've seen the relative price of Solana versus in Ethereum terms kind of trend a lot higher. And so there's a lot of ground that Solana's making up versus Ethereum in terms of price action. But the other thing that's really interesting is that the Solana implied vol is around the 70 handle, which is pretty similar to the ETH implied vol. But something like the meltdown in early August, that quickly jumped Solana realized vol to the 200 handle. So there's a little bit more potential for Solana vol to jump around than Ethereum vol. And then there's kind of that price trend. So again, the relative vol of Ethereum versus Bitcoin or Solana, there's kind of interesting trades there that I find to be probably persistent in the short term to medium term. And that's really kind of ETH underperformance and outperformance by coins such as Solana.
some of the early adopters of ETH, Mr. Greg, are maybe starting, I won't say sour on it, but they're starting to look at it as kind of the established alternative and starting to look at some of the up-and-comers out there as well, which is kind of fascinating. The evolution of the crypto space, always ongoing. Unfortunately, this show is not always ongoing, listeners. That music means we have come to the end of our journey through the world of crypto for this week. But Mr. Greg, before we go, I was just touching on it at the start of the show. You folks over there always cooking up some cool things up your sleeves. Leave our listeners with a little bit of a hint, a little bit of a tease of what they can look forward to coming down the pike from you folks over there at Amberdata, sir.
Yeah, so one of the things that we've launched, and this is a little bit more for sort of institutional clients, OTC desks, and exchanges, but we have some SVI calibrated surfaces. We made those with our friend Ewan Sinclair, just launched a white paper around all that work on SSRN. Very excited about that stuff. So that's in production now, and so we have some really well calibrated volatility surfaces for Bitcoin and for Ethereum, which really helps with this type of illiquid asset. So that gives you, perfect delta surfaces. It gives you an infinite range of strikes if you wanted to know the vol for some bespoke strike, things like that. So that's a very exciting product. And then outside of that, we have some TradFi data coming in to basically compare where Bitcoin on offshore exchanges such as Deribit, where that vol is lining up versus some traditional finance assets to really compare sort of those relative vol trades. So those are some of the exciting things going on right now.
There you go, listeners. Check them out. Begin your journey. Amberdata.io, the place to go to kick the tires and light the fires. We have to get on out of here. That is going to do it for us on the network today. But never fear, more coming at you tomorrow. I'll be back with our good buddy, Mr. Matt Amberson, who I have done a crypto panel or two with back in the day. So chances are we will dovetail into a little bit of crypto on tomorrow's Pro Q&A session. That, of course, is available over there, theoptionsinsider.com/pro. That'll give you access to the live stream and, of course, the Pro podcast feed. We're all that fun. Over 150 now Pro Q&A sessions, which is insane. And close to 400 total episodes on that feed now. So it's a banger. theoptionsinsider.com/pro, the place to go. And, of course, after that on Wednesday, our newest doubleheader day on the network, listeners, we kick things off with your beloved Options Bootcamp, which I know a lot of you out there who are newer to the world of options coming from the crypto landscape. Options Bootcamp, a great starting place for you folks. And then after that, the newest addition to the network, the Futures Rundown. Thursday, of course, another doubleheader day, the Option Block, and This Week in Futures. Options Friday, a little bit of all with some volatility views. Then after that, one final time for you pro folks coming back for a whole bunch of options oddities, which that show has been a banger of late as well. If you're listening to that one, we've had a lot of good trades come across the radar there. And we're back again next Monday, listeners. Another episode of the Crypto Rundown. Stay safe out there.
The Crypto Rundown is brought to you by Amberdata. If you're entering the digital asset class, you'll need access to granular on-chain and market data from multiple venues to power research, trading, risk management, and compliance. Amberdata delivers comprehensive data and insights into blockchain networks, crypto markets, and decentralized finance, empowering financial institutions to apply traditional finance methods to digital assets. Amberdata eliminates the infrastructure setup, integration challenges, and maintenance headaches to access digital asset data, reducing cost and time to market to enter the digital asset class. Learn more and download their digital asset data guide at www.amberdata.io. You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options. stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions@theoptionsinsider.com.